What? What is this?
I don't know. What is it? It's a bag.
It's a bag of money. I'm rich.
No, that belongs in a museum.
I'm rich.
Hey, let me see those.
But they're mine. Finders keepers.
Well, let's verify if it's an artifact. If it's not, you can keep it.
I need to verify these. There's a note. Oh, it's written in Aramaic.
What does it say?
It says these are 30 pieces of silver.
What? 30 pieces of silver?
How much is that in money?
It's like over $100.
I think these are the coins. Could these be the 30 pieces that I'm thinking of?
I mean, it might be it.
But
They look like ancient coins to me.
Finders keepers.
Wait,
These belong in a museum.
those could be the coins that Judas Iscariot betrayed for Jesus.
You could be right. It does say in the Bible that Judas Iscariot was given 30 pieces of silver by the religious leaders to betray Jesus. But see, after Jesus' death, he felt so bad about it that he threw them back into the temple and said he didn't want them. And those coins were used to buy the potter's field.
So does that mean that I can have it?
No, they still go to a museum.
Hey everybody, it's me, Pastor Natalie, and this is Bethel Kids Online. Today we're going to be asking the question, did all the Jews really want Jesus dead? To answer today's question, we're going to have to travel all the way back to Bible times to uncover the truth of what really happened the night of Jesus' trial. Sometime before Jesus took his disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, Judas Iscariot, one of his 12 disciples, went to the chief priests in the temple. He asked them, "What are you willing to give me to deliver Jesus over to you?" The chief priests told Judas that they would pay him 30 coins to betray Jesus, and from that day on, Judas was looking for an opportunity to betray his friend. On the night that Judas planned to betray Jesus, he was in the Garden of Gethsemane with the disciples praying. After Jesus had finished praying, he began talking with his disciples. As he was talking with the disciples, Judas came forward, followed by a large crowd. Because the people in the crowd didn't know what Jesus looked like, Judas had arranged a way for them to identify him. He said, "The man that I kiss, arrest him." When Judas arrived at the garden, he walked over to Jesus, said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Now that may sound crazy to us, but back in biblical times, that was a common greeting. And actually, it's still practiced in the Middle East today. After Judas had kissed Jesus, Jesus looked at Judas and said, "Do what you came for, friend." And the men in the crowd stepped forward and seized Jesus to arrest him. Jesus turned to those in the crowd and he said, "Am I leading a rebellion that you would come and capture me? Every day I sat in the temple courts teaching and you did not arrest me." All of this is happening so that the writings of the prophets might be fulfilled. As it became clear that Jesus was going to be taken to the chief priest for trial, those closest to him, even his disciples, fled in fear. They abandoned Jesus, leaving him alone to face the suffering he would endure to save the world from their sins. The angry crowd arrested Jesus and led him to where Caiaphas the high priest and the other leaders and officials had gathered. The chief priests and the elder rabbis, called the Sanhedrin, were looking for false information and false testimonies so that they could put Jesus to death. They didn't like what Jesus was teaching. He was trying to change what they thought the law was. The law to them was about rules and regulations. To them, religion was obeying the law in even the tiniest little rule monitoring ways. But Jesus taught us through his time on earth that religion isn't about following rules to the T. It's about loving God and loving others. Even though multiple people came forward to give false testimony against Jesus, the Sanhedrin were unable to find him guilty of anything. Finally, 2 men came forward and they told the council, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." When the high priest heard this, he stood from his chair and looked at Jesus and said, "Are you not going to say anything to defend yourself or explain the charges that these men bring against you?" But Jesus just sat there and remained silent. Jesus' silence and refusal to respond to the men's accusations irritated Caiaphas. The high priest said to Jesus, "I charge you under oath by the living God. Are you the Messiah? Are you the Son of God?" To this question, Jesus finally gave an answer. Jesus responded, "You have said it is so. And I tell you the truth, from now on, you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Father." Upon hearing this, Caiaphas tore his clothes and says, "He has spoken blasphemy. Do we need any more witnesses?" The angry crowd agreed with Caiaphas, and they shouted, "He is worthy of death." Next, Jesus was put on trial before the Roman leader Pilate. But even Pilate didn't want to kill Jesus. Pilate said, "He has done nothing that deserves death." But by this time, the crowd had been worked into a frenzy, and they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate decided to give in to the crowd to keep the peace. He said, "I'm going to give you what you want to keep peace, but I have nothing to do with this. I wash my hands of this." And at that, he turned Jesus over to the Roman officials to be crucified. Our question for the day is, did all the Jews want to kill Jesus? And as we saw in our story, it wasn't all of the Jews. The leaders and the elders and the high priest wanted to kill Jesus, and because they wanted him gone, they decided to stir up a crowd of Jews to also want to crucify Jesus. And that group of angry people, they went to Pilate and they demanded that Jesus be crucified. The men were so angry and mean that Pilate decided to give in to them. Before Jesus was sentenced to be killed, Pilate asked the people a question. See, it was customary in this time for the Roman leaders to release one prisoner to the people during the time of Passover. Pilate gave the crowd an option of two men. One was a zealot named Barabbas, the other was Jesus. Barabbas had led riots against the Roman Empire, and that was actually one of the reasons why he was in prison. See, the Jewish people saw the Messiah more as someone who would come and get rid of Roman leadership in their country. They wanted a Messiah more like Barabbas. But see, God knew what kind of Messiah we needed. We needed a Messiah that wasn't going to overthrow the leadership at that time. We needed someone who was going to teach us more about God's laws and about God's love. God knew that we needed Jesus. So when Pilate asked his question, the Jewish crowd asked that Barabbas go free and that Jesus be crucified. See, the angry crowd decided what would happen to Jesus, not the entire country. And then the Roman leaders, they were the ones that sentenced Jesus to death. On the day that Jesus was sentenced, there were Jews in the country that wanted Jesus dead. But there were so many more who believed that he really was the Messiah, that he really was God's son. See, sometimes you and I, we can be like the people in the crowd. We know what we want, but we're not always good at recognizing what we need. Thankfully, we can always go to God and trust him to provide what we need. See, God always knows exactly what we need and exactly when we need it. That was it for our story today. I hope you join us next week for a special Easter episode of Bethel Kids Online.